Hello, my dear friends and fellow developers. Welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to continue our journey in which we are discussing different topics related to our LWC framework. We have came a long way in which we discussed different topics like how we can render a list, how can render a template. We have also seen how can we use getter. We have also discussed about the life cycle of an LWC framework. So today we are going to continue the same journey, and in today's session we will discuss about query selectors. So this is one of the crucial topic of our LWC framework because without this you will not be able to target any element of an HTML and do the needed operation. So this is one of the crucial topic. So today we will discuss the same like what are query selectors and how we can use it. So the query selector and query selector all methods are standard DOM APIs. So basically these are JavaScript methods which basically we used in our LWC framework. But there is a one key difference between these two selectors like query selector and query selector all. So difference is like query selector returns the first element that matches the selector and query selector all returns the array of DOM element. So this is one of the crucial difference between these two. Like in selector, it simply returns the first element which matches our criteria, and in query selector all, it will returns the entire array of DOM elements. These are the things. Now, call to these methods basically it depends like how you are trying to access the element, whether it is accessing the element which the component owns or whether it is trying to access the element which is passed by a slot. So today we'll see both the scenarios like how we can access these two selectors when we are accessing the component which are in the same component or we are accessing the component which are passed by a slot. So firstly, we will discuss to access the elements that component owns. So to access element rendered by component with standard DOM APIs, we have to use the template to call the query method. So the syntax will be like this dot template dot query selector and this dot template dot query selector all. So basically, whenever we are trying to access an element in which the component is holding, or let's suppose in same LWC component, we are having HTML template in which we are trying to access it. So in that case, we have to make use this syntax like this dot query selector all and this dot query selector, these two syntaxes. But there is one thing which we need to be considered is like the order of the element is not guaranteed. So it might happen like if you use query selector all, so it might return that second element can come to the first of index of the array, which is returned. So the order of the element is not guaranteed. So now the second point, or you can say the crucial point is like the elements which are not rendered in DOM aren't returned by query selector. So let's suppose during rendering phase, the element itself is not rendered. So, and if you are hitting this query selector method, so in this scenario, the element will not be returned to this call because the component itself is not rendered in our browser. One more thing, or the last point, or the crucial point is like we should not include IDs in our selectors. The reason being, when the template HTML template is used in our LWC, so in runtime during rendering phase, it changes this IDs into globally unique values. So now what will happen if you will use IDs in these parameters for query selector and query selector all? So it will not be able to find that ID because that ID will be transformed to the unique value, and then you might encounter some issues or errors that the component is not being fetched or you cannot access it and do the needed operation. So it is always said that we should never use IDs in the parameter for query selector and query selector all. So now here we have an example. So in this in HTML template we have two divs like first and second, and then we have slot over here which generally holds task 1 and task 2. So now, since in this example, the component itself owns the element. So now, when we will use this syntax like this dot template dot query selector div, so it will return the first element. And because as we have seen that it will return the first element which matches the criteria. So this will return this first element div first. Now, if you use spam, so it will return null because spam element is not there at all. So it will return null. Now, in case of query selector, what it will do, it will return the array of the elements which satisfy this parameter. So it will return div first and div second. So this is how the template.query selector has to be used when we are trying to access the elements in which the component itself owns the elements. Now let's see how the slots used. So there are some differences between accessing the data via slots and accessing the data which component owns. So the first point is like the component doesn't own DOM elements that are passed it via slot. So this is one of the crucial thing, that if we are working with slots, so it is not treated its own component whenever you are passing the data through the slots mechanism. So these DOM elements are in the component shadow tree, as because these are passed via slot, so it will not consider in its own shadow tree. So here, instead of template, we have to make use of generic statement like this dot query selector and this dot query selector all. So here we will not use template because the data which is passed by a slot are not considered in the same shadow tree or same DOM structure. So in this case, we have to make use of this dot query selector and this dot query selector all. Because of this, we should not use this dot template over here. Now here we have one example how the query selector and query selector all will be used. So let's suppose in HTML we have two spans, green button and red button. So if we use digital query selector with the spam, so it will return the first element which matches the criteria, and if we use the all, it will return the array of the spams. So this is how we can access the HTML elements with the help of this.template.query selector or this.query selector based on the scenario, like how we are accessing the data, whether the component owns the element or the data has been passed via slot. So yeah, that's pretty much for today's session, in which we have seen what are query selectors and how we can access the query selectors based on different scenarios when the component owns the element or when the data is passed via slot. Hopefully, this session will be fruitful to you. If you like the content, please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much if you are viewing so far. Thank you. Bye bye.